Hey guys, this is Jonathan from Fitness for Freedom. Today we are going to show you how to build your very first exercise program. Alright, so when most people start exercising, they don't usually know where to start. So what they do is they'll go to a fitness class, they'll open up a magazine, or they'll just watch other people working out and they'll try doing the exercises that they see. And then when they see exercises and they try them and they're working the muscles that they want to work, then they'll continue to do those exercises. But if they're doing exercises that they feel like they're not good or they're not targeting the right muscles, then they'll stop doing them, which is fine and it's a good way to start. The problem is that over the course of time, if you're doing all the same exercises all the time, then you start to develop muscle imbalances. So this could be strength imbalances, flexibility imbalances, or it could even be movement imbalances, which in the long run is something you're trying to avoid because that's when injury starts to happen, when you don't move properly and you have all these sort of imbalances. So what we're going to do today is go through a very basic exercise program that covers all of your bases. I mean, is it the best program that you could do? No, it's not the best, but it is going to take you through the very basics that you need to learn before you can start advancing yourself into more complex and harder to do exercises. So before we get into the actual exercise program or the actual exercises, there's a few principles that I want to go through first to make sure you understand what's going into the program or some of the thoughts behind it. So the first is, as you're doing exercises, I want you to focus on doing the movement properly and not worry about how much weight you're lifting. So practice doing the proper movements and going through your full range of motion somewhere between 10 and 15 repetitions. Now, if we're doing a push-up, that's so your chest touches the floor all the way and then your arms are all the way extended. So just as an example, you want to make sure you're going through your full range of motion so that you groove the proper movement patterns. By grooving the proper movement patterns early on, then you're setting yourself up to significantly decrease your chance of becoming injured as you start getting into more advanced and harder exercises. All right, so often in magazines, you'll see that a program has exercises back to back or in a superset or circuit sort of a way. Now, this is okay and it is a good way to train, except it's not how I would recommend most beginners to train. So if you're trying to learn the proper movement pattern, just do one exercise at a time. So you're doing your one exercise, 10 to 15 repetitions at a weight that's almost a failure, but not quite, and then take a minute to a minute and a half break and do that same exercise again, at least 2 times, preferably 3 times. So I like 3 times because that seems to be the right amount of volume to start to get your muscles to stimulate, to change. You may want to increase that a little bit more as you become more advanced, but it's a very good starting point for now. So the last thing I want you to consider as you're building your own exercise program is that you should really have more pulling exercises than pushing exercises. So our good recommendation would be at least 2 pulling exercises for every one, but for me, preferably 3. So I think 3 is sort of that magic number. And by pulling exercise, I mean anything where you're pulling the weight towards you, whether that's a lat pull down, a bent over row, a pull up, or a shoulder stabilization exercise like a T raise or a W raise. Anything where you're bringing your shoulder blades sort of down and back into this position to help you mostly to improve your posture, but also help you maintain your balance as you build your exercise programs, because most people tend to be drawn towards pushing exercises. So it's really important you keep all those pulling exercises in there. Okay, so most workouts can be broken into 3 separate parts: the warm-up, the workout, and the cool down. Now we'll go through each of these individually, but first let's start with the warm-up. So the main reason for the warm-up is for you to practice the movements that you're going to do in your actual workout to increase the blood flow to the muscles. So what this does is it helps the muscle become more pliable, which decreases your chance of injury, but it also lets you know if you're injured or hurt from a previous workout or something else that you did that was unrelated to the workout. Because the last thing that you want to do is try to start lifting heavy weights without warming up properly, because that's when you really increase your chance of becoming injured. So if we're doing a full body warm up, I really like to start with the squat because the legs are the biggest muscle in your body. So you have your quads, your hamstrings, and your glutes. I think it's really important to get them sort of moving and woken up first. Now this can be as simple as doing a bodyweight squat or a squat with lighter weight, or you could do a split squat where you're dropping straight down. If you struggle with the squat movement or the split squat bothers your knees or something like that, then you can do a wall sit against the wall, and this can take some of the pressure off your knees. Or if you're really advanced, you can do an axe chop where you get your hips and your arms involved all at the same time, which just gets more of your body moving. Which leads us into the next exercise that I like to do, which is the hand plank. So often what I like about the hand plank, or as a good exercise for a warm-up is the hand plank, is that it really gets your whole body involved. So you have your arms, your shoulders, your core and your glutes and your legs, everything sort of gets a chance to work. And you can variate it into all sorts of harder variations, like doing a leg lift or doing a push-up plus, which I would consider a pulling exercise because it's for your shoulder stabilizer muscles. And you can do 15 of those or just hold the hand plank for 30 seconds or 45 or a minute, whatever works for you. And then for the next exercise, we would probably go into something like a glute bridge. So what's good about the glute bridge is that it really helps get your glutes involved, and glutes are often not very active in someone. And because it's a warm-up, I would do an easier variation of the glute bridge. So repetitions for 15 straight up and down, or maybe just a straight hold for a minute. If you're a little bit more advanced, you could try a march or a single leg glute bridge, but that would be up to you depending on how strong you are. Okay, and then from there, we would probably roll right into a low trap punch. So a low trap punch can be done on the floor or a bench or with your chest on the stability ball, okay, where you have your hands out like this. You're going out in a Y and then touching your hands behind your back and then going out into a Y again. Now the low trap is an often underdeveloped muscle in people. It's a good posture muscle, which is why I like putting it in as part of the warm-up. Plus, it's easy to do and is a good warm-up for the future shoulder press or pike push-out exercises that we're going to do. So another exercise that I really like to do is the hip hinge as part of the warm-up. So the hip hinge is a really good exercise because it is a movement pattern that is really important for you to practice because it's one you'll use in your everyday life. So it looks just like this, with your hands in front of your thighs and you push your bum back. And you know you're doing it properly because you'll feel a really strong pull in your hamstrings even without weight. Now, it's really important to do this one properly because during the workout, I'm going to have you do this exact same exercise except with dumbbells, which means you need to do it properly. Otherwise, you could hurt your back, and we want to really avoid that. Okay, and this brings us to the last exercise, or the last exercise of this particular warm-up, and that is the bow and arrow. So with the bow and arrow, you're going to take a staggered stance, and I'm just going to shorten it up here. Normally you would hold on to the handle, but I want to stay in the frame. Okay, and you'll squeeze your shoulder blade down and back and do a simple row in. And again, we're practicing the shoulder stabilization movement, or squeezing your shoulder blade down and back, which is another pulling exercise. Okay, so probably 12 to 15 repetitions of that sort of an exercise. Okay, so a warm-up like this will take you roughly 6 to 10 minutes, not more than 10. You're wasting time if it takes more than 10 minutes. And then that gets all of your muscles warmed up for the workout that we're about to do. For the actual workout, I recommend starting with legs for the exact same reasons that we do in the warm-up. They are the biggest muscle in your body and they require the most energy, and you'll be able to lift the most weight with them. So you want to be as fresh as possible when you're lifting the most weight possible. Now, you can do a leg exercise or a big leg exercise like a squat or holding weights, or you could do a split squat, or if you find that those are too hard, then you can do a stability ball wall squat against the wall. It doesn't really matter as long as you're doing a big leg exercise. And what I would recommend is that you actually mix it up. So some days do split squats, other days do basic bilateral squats. So that's a straight squat. And then what that does is it helps train your body to move in different ways while still training your big leg muscles. So the next exercise I would recommend putting into your actual workout is a big pull. So why the big pull next? Well, it's because most people like to skip the pulling exercises. So that's why I always like to put it near the top. Put exercises that you dislike at the beginning because then you're more likely to do them, and you'll always do the exercises that you like at the end. So a pull exercise is a bow and arrow like we did in the warm-up, or a bent over row, or a pull-up or a lat pull-down, anything where you're squeezing your shoulder blade down and back. So this is a dumbbell bent over row, okay, where I'm really squeezing my shoulder blade down and back. It doesn't really matter what variation of pull exercise that you're doing as long as it's like this and that you focus on doing it properly, okay? So number 2, big pull exercise. So up next we have the core exercise. Now, this is a little bit tricky because the core is a really complicated muscle group and there are several aspects to it. So I would recommend alternating between doing a sort of rectus abdominis style exercise like the plank and then doing a side plank on the other day. So a plank exercise, I think most people have probably seen it, and it's one of the most common ones that you'll see in a magazine. So it's just like this. If you wanted to make it a little bit more challenging because that's too easy, then you can do it on a stability ball. Okay, just like this, the exact same way, or one more step up, you can push your elbows forward. Okay, so just do some trial and error to find the level of difficulty that's right for you. Now, the other side, or your oblique muscles, would be trained doing a side plank. Okay, so that's just like this. Now, normally on most people's programs, I would actually have you do some variation of both of those exercises. The problem is that when you're first starting out, you don't want to spend 45 minutes or an hour and a half in the gym. And if we do every single exercise all the time, what happens is that the program ends up being really, really long. So that's why I would alternate between those two exercises, even though they target slightly different muscle groups. So next up, we have a big push exercise. Now, for most people, if you're beginning, this means a push-up. So from your stairs or from your knees or maybe from your feet, it doesn't really matter. They're basically all the same exercise. It's just whatever level of difficulty works for you. Now, one thing with your big push is that it's important you let your shoulder blades move as you're doing the motion. Some people try to do a push-up or a chest press with dumbbells without letting their shoulder blades move at the same time. And it's not good form. And you want your shoulder blades to be able to move as much as possible. Not as much as possible. You want them to be able to move freely the way that they're designed and supposed to move. So number 4 is big push. So up next we have the hip hinge exercise. So just like in the warm-up, you do the exact same motion, except this time you hold weights in front of your body. Now, what I like about the hip hinge is that it's a really practical exercise, maybe even the most practical exercise that you will do, because you have to pick stuff up off the floor, okay? Whether that's groceries, a box, your child, anything like that, you will have to pick things up and down off the floor. Now, not everyone can do that exercise properly, and I don't recommend it to everyone. The problem is that lots of people have a tendency to do this instead as they do it, and they have a lot of trouble pushing their hips back and keeping their back nice and flat. Which, if that's the case, I recommend you do the stability ball leg curl, which we have demonstrated in the picture below. So it's a really good exercise for your hamstrings. It's not as practical as doing the hip hinge or the Romanian deadlift, but it is still a very good exercise that you can do instead. Okay, so the last exercise of this series, or exercise number 6, is the overhead press. Now, my preference is to use dumbbells for this because dumbbells are malleable. What I mean by that is that if you're using a barbell, you're forced to keep your shoulder blades down and back all the way and your chest right out to press directly over top, overhead. But with a dumbbell, it allows you to change the angle of your arms. So if you're someone who is very anteriorly rotated or your shoulders come forward quite a bit, then you're not going to be able to do a barbell overhead press, and you might even hurt yourself or badly hurt yourself. And if that's the case, then I recommend you use dumbbells, because dumbbells let you hold a neutral grip and you can push them straight up over your head or come forward a little bit if you need to, because that's your natural plane of motion. Now, as you get stronger or as your posture improves, then you'll slowly be able to start angling your arms out, and then one day the barbell overhead press might be better, or it might be more effective. Now, if you do not have dumbbells or you don't really want to do an overhead shoulder press, you can do a pike push-up instead, which is what we have in the video below. Now, what's good about the pike push-up is that there's a few different levels of difficulty, and they don't require any weight, as well as you can play with the angle of your hands to make it the most comfortable for your shoulders and decrease your chance of becoming injured. So that's the last exercise. It is the overhead press, and will take us down to the cool down. All right, so this brings us to the last portion of a workout, or the cool down. Now, the cool down is probably the least important part of a workout, but if you like to feel less sore in the following days, or you have a tendency to possibly be injured or feel extra tight in certain areas after you've trained them, then a cool down will be very important. Now, there are three components of a cool down three components that I would recommend making part of a cool down. The first is foam rolling. So I find foam rolling the most effective thing, or one of the most effective things that you can do. Now, to do it properly, what you're going to do is you lay on the roller and you go to the muscles that you trained that day. So today we did a lot of leg stuff, which means my glutes got exercised. So I'm going to demonstrate on my glutes. So as I roll them out, I'm going to find spots that are a little bit more sore. So actually this is, if you lengthen the muscle when you roll out, you're more likely to feel sore spots, and this lengthens my glute by crossing my leg over. Okay, so I'll find spots that are more sore and I'm going to stay on them and do little rolls across them for maybe 15 seconds or so, and then I'll move on to other areas. And then when I feel like that's pretty well rolled out, then I just move to the next muscle group, which may be my hamstrings for today. Okay, so foam rolling is really good. You just need to spend a few minutes doing it on the muscles you train on a given day. Now, the next thing that you can do for a cool down would be a static stretch. So a static stretch is, think of your high school gym class where you used to touch your toes, or in this case, we're going to do a quadricep stretch where you grab your ankle and pull your heel towards your bum. So a static stretch, again, do it on either areas where you tend to be sore, or if you have sore joints, then you might want to stretch the muscles around that joint. That could help alleviate that pain a little bit. You're holding a stretch for about 20 to 30, probably maybe even 45 seconds, depending on how tight the muscle is. And what will happen is that when you're doing a stretch, you'll feel this tightness where you don't want to pull the muscle any further. But then after a certain amount of time, it sort of relaxes, and then you can pull it again and just get a little bit more stretch out of it. And you can do that 2 or 3 times. And after about the third time, then you know you're probably done, and that's about as far as you're going to be able to stretch it. Now, the last portion of a cool down, or the last thing you can do, is a dynamic stretch. Now, there are really only a few muscles in your body that you do a dynamic stretch with, which will be in other videos. But for this video, or this demonstration, we'll just talk about the snow angel, which is for your pec minor muscle. So you just lay over on your side, and you're going to do this movement where you turn your palm up to the ceiling and touch your hand to the top of your head, and try to maintain all the contact points on the floor. So what's good about this exercise is that you're moving the muscle and stretching it at the same time, which will help you improve your range of motion around that joint even more. So if you're someone who's trying to improve your posture, then that snow angel exercise would be a good dynamic stretch to do at the end of a workout when your muscles are their most able to move, or they're their most pliable, and where you're most likely to get the most benefit from doing it. All right, so this was a good introduction into a basic exercise program. Now, if you're a little bit experienced, you probably noticed there are some holes in it. We only did sagittal plane style exercises, which is mostly push, pulling, and moving in this sort of a direction. We didn't do any rotation or anti-rotation exercises, which are good types of exercises to do, but I would consider them more intermediate to advanced. And since this is for beginners and you're just learning, then stick with a program like this that's really basic. And once you get these basic movement patterns down and you understand how your body moves, then you can get into some of the more advanced exercise techniques. So spend 4 to 6 weeks doing this stuff first, and then you can move on to the next step. Now, if you found this video helpful, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any comments or questions, leave them in the box below. Take care, and we'll talk to you next time.